We've left the summit behind, the cross, the French monument, and the no man's land that swallowed a generation of men. Now we're heading northeast, down the slope that nobody talks about. This is not the side of the mountain that appears in the history books. No French attack after 1915 reached these positions and took them permanently. The Germans built here as though they were building to stay. We're following the trenches and eventually the old roadways along the northeastern flank, connecting the German rear installations that supported the summit positions. Kitchens, command posts, ammunition depots, barracks carved directly into the rock. The men who fought on the Hartmannsweilerkopf didn't just appear at the front line. They were housed, fed and supplied from this slope. This is where that happened. The Papstuhl. The name means papal throne, presumably a rock formation that someone found sufficiently imposing. What it actually is, a tunnel, a ladder and a concrete gun shield at the top. Whoever was stationed here was not sheltering, they were watching or firing. The position sits a few meters closer to the French line than the Cardinal Position below. That's the tactical logic. The Cardinal is the secure backbone, multi-story, deeply excavated, built for sustained occupation. The Papstuhl is the forward element, exposed, minimal, designed for observation and covering fire rather than shelter. You don't sleep here, you watch. The naming conventions on this slope are worth noting. Papstuhl, Kardinal, Bischofshut further up. Papal throne, cardinal, bishop's head. A deliberate ecclesiastical hierarchy of place names running up the mountain toward the summit. Whether this was piety, irony, or simply the way German soldiers organized their mental map of contested terrain, it tells you something about 4 years of continuous occupation, long enough to develop a complete local geography. I don't know, this doesn't look too safe. This doesn't either. But this one looks pretty intriguing. Let's see if I can make it. It's laid out with wood. And there's a gun embrasure. This wood looks to be pretty much original from the time. Impressing. Wow. So these positions we see here are pretty much backward positions because the front line is approximately 300 to 400 meters up the hill. So in this area here, yeah, well, I suppose this would have been for reserve troops. This is the Cardinal. The name comes from the officer who supervised its construction, a man whose actual name has mostly been lost to the record, but whose nickname stuck to the rock permanently. What he built is not a simple shelter. This is a multi-level underground fortification cut directly into the cliff face. 3 floors of galleries, firing positions and sheltered space. From above it looks like a natural rock feature. From inside it's a small vertical city. The Cardinal represents the full extent of German engineering ambition on this mountain. They weren't improvising. They were building permanent fortifications in rock using pneumatic drills brought up the slope by their own cableway system. This structure took months to build and was intended to be here indefinitely. Wow. Now look at that.
impressing what they built.
French attacks reached the Cardinal but never took it. On December 21st, 1915, during the largest French offensive on this mountain, their troops pushed past the summit and descended the northeast slope, reaching the 700-meter contour line. They stopped here. Not enough men, not enough ammunition, darkness coming on. By the following morning, the German counterattack had recovered everything. The Cardinal remained German until the armistice. This is the furthest point reached by the French. This cross commemorates two French soldiers, Eugène Tilly and Jean Turlet, who died here on October 16, 1915. Along this trail you pass at least 3 food service facilities in close proximity. The Landwehr Infanterie Regiment 56 kitchen at around 750 meters altitude and other general kitchens nearby.
Look at this beautiful building. Here it says kitchen. Wow.
They were part of a planned logistical system that also included 2 cableways, a light railway running from a town below, and over 1,000 labourers and mule teams at peak construction. Standing inside a structure like this, it's easy to project a kind of brutal functionality onto it. But the men stationed here, they named everything. They held church services, they maintained a barber, a dentist, and a canteen with alcohol. The Hartmannsweilerkopf for the Germans wasn't just a position to be held. It was a place where they lived for months at a time. The Germans understood something that tends to get overlooked in battlefield narratives. You cannot fight a sustained mountain war without feeding the men who fight it. The Hartmannsweilerkopf was at 956 meters above sea level. The nearest railhead was in the valley. Everything, ammunition, timber, concrete, food and so on, had to come up that slope. The Klippenstollen. The building is still largely standing, a 2-story structure on the edge of the old road at the arrival point of the D11 cableway. Underneath the building, a U-shaped underground gallery runs into the hillside. Both entrances are now partially collapsed, which is typical for the deeper excavations on this slope. The subsurface work on the Hartmannsweilerkopf has been settling and shifting for over a century.
Wow. Yeah, well, wouldn't recommend going in here.
Next to the building, a little downhill, was a station of the second cableway. The Germans operated 2 cableways on this mountain, one departing from near Wattweiler and one from the heights of Wünheim. The Klippenstollen was where the second line terminated. Everything that arrived here had to be carried the rest of the way up on foot or by mule. The The mark of LIR 124 is still visible on the facade here. Württembergisches Landwehr-Infanterieregiment number 124. Württemberg, Southern Germany, Baden-Württemberg today. Many of the men who served on the Hartmannsweilerkopf were from the southwest of Germany, relatively close to the Alsace border. Some of them may have had relatives on the other side of the Vosges, in villages that had been French before 1871 and would be French again after 1918. The Alsace question, who it belonged to, who had the right to call it home, ran underneath the entire conflict here. This wasn't just a strategic mountain, it was a piece of contested identity. Arriving at the so-called Jägerfels position, it is worth talking about the inscriptions on the bunkers. MGK, standing for Machine Gun Company of the Gardejägers, an infantry unit from southern Germany. Next we see the Kampfzentrale Jägerfels, MWK 312, 1915 to 1917. Combat Center, Jäger Rock. Minenwerfer Command 312. The date tell you when this position was active at full capacity. MWK stands for Minenwerfer Company, Mortar Company. The Minenwerfer were the German trench mortars, and on the Hartmannsweilerkopf they were decisive. The first use of a Minenwerfer on this mountain on January 21st, 1915, ended the French occupation of the summit in a single afternoon. 20 shells, 50 kilograms each. The French garrison surrendered. 127 men and 3 officers went into captivity. Off the command post there's a Minenwerfer emplacement. The base is still there. The ladder gives access to it. The position had a clear firing arc across the approaches to the summit from the southwest, precisely the direction from which French attacks came repeatedly throughout 1915.
And once again, a heavy mortar position. Wow, what a fortress. Stunning.
The Jägerfels served as the nerve center for German fire coordination on this sector of the slope. Not the firing itself, that happened at the front positions, but the targeting, the timing, the communication between observers and crews. In mountain warfare, mortar fire was often more decisive than artillery. Shells from flat trajectory guns missed the reverse slopes entirely. Mortars didn't. The Uhlanenfriedhof, the Uhlan Cemetery. It sits in the forest on the eastern slope, near the Sandgrubenkopf, largely hidden from the main trail system. It was almost abandoned after the war, once the bodies of most soldiers were exhumed and consolidated into the larger military cemeteries in the region. Originally, more than 70 graves were here. Today, 36 markers remain. The upkeep is maintained by the Volksbund Deutsche Kriegsgräberfürsorge and the Friends of Hartmannsweilerkopf Association. The name of the cemetery is slightly misleading. The Uhlans were Polish-Lithuanian light cavalry, lancers, who had been deployed to the Hartmannsweilerkopf sector and were quartered in a camp nearby. When casualties began in April 1915, this location was used as an emergency burial site for whoever needed burying. The markers include men from Landwehr Infanterie Regiment 56, from the Gardejäger Battalion, and others who died in this sector. There is no permanent German military cemetery on the Hartmannsweilerkopf itself. The main German cemetery for this sector is in Cernay, down in the valley. 7,085 German dead from across multiple fronts in the region. The Ulanenfriedhof is one of the few original in-field cemeteries from the mountain that still exist in any form. The mountain kept its dead, at least for a while. Some of them it keeps still. The Feste Baden was named for the Grand Duchy of Baden, the southwestern German state whose territory bordered Alsace along the Rhine. By the time you reach this position, you've descended the full depth of the German rear system on the northeast slope. The Feste Baden lies on the route connecting the Hirzenstein to the Kantine Zeller, one of the major traverse paths across this side of the mountain. It was part of the mid-slope defensive chain, positioned to support the frontline positions higher up and to cover the supply routes below. Look at this massive slab of concrete. That's wow. I honestly have no idea what this once might have been. Let's have a look from the other side. But both these bunkers appear that they have been blown to destroy them. Maybe there was some sort of machine mortar or a cannon. I have no idea. By 1917 and 18, the Hartmannsweilerkopf had settled into a holding pattern. The major battles were over. German units conducted small raids to take prisoners, to keep the French off balance, to maintain the fiction of an active front on a mountain that had long since ceased to be strategically decisive. The men rotating through positions like the Feste Baden were waiting, largely, for a war that was being decided elsewhere. This mountain was held and contested for 4 years, from December 1914 to November 1918. The Germans never lost it permanently. The French never took it for good. The summit cross stands on ground that, technically, neither side fully controlled for most of the war. So this is definitely one of the last positions here.
says built 1917, machine gun company L124. Now we're back at where we started. It was quite a trip. To be quite honest, I'm pretty much wrecked. I hope you enjoyed this video. A subscription and a like would be highly appreciated. And see you next time. Have a wonderful week. Bye.